Did you know that there are 7 things that the average person does that totally destroys their knees? In this video, I'm going to reveal what those 7 things are and how you can avoid them. Hi everybody, my name is Will Harlow and I'm the Over-Fifties specialist physio here at HT Physio in Farnham. And today I'm going to be revealing the 7 things that destroy your knees so you can avoid them and you can understand why it's so important. Now, before we dive into the content of the video, if you haven't already, please hit like on the video and subscribe to the channel using the link in the bottom right of the video, because then you'll be the first to hear about our new videos when they come out. Now that that's been said, let's talk about the 7 things that people do that destroy their knees. Now, the first thing that I see people do all the time, which is really bad for your knees, is twisting your knee with a planted foot. What I'm talking about here is putting your foot down on the floor and then twisting the knee. And you might think, well, I don't do that. But most of us do that quite a lot of the time throughout the day. You might be planting your foot and twisting as you pull something out of the washing machine. You might be planting your foot and twisting as you pull a bin out from behind the shed. You might be planting your foot and twisting as you get stuff in and out of the car. We do this kind of thing all the time. And the problem with this is that there are structures within the knee joint, namely the meniscus being probably the most important, that are very tightly attached to the structures around them. And when we twist, those structures have got nowhere to go and they don't have much given in them, so they end up tearing. Now, your knee joint only has 2 movements, forward and back. You have a little bit of twist, but any more than a little bit of twist and we're in trouble. And what's more, when you've planted your foot and then you're twisting, typically you're putting weight through the limb so that the twist is magnified and that can lead to injury. So avoid planting your foot and twisting to protect your knee. Now, the second thing that people do that destroys their knees is heavy squats with bad form. Now, a squat is actually a great exercise to build up strength in the lower limb. It can improve strength in the quads, which are the thigh muscles, and the glutes, which are the muscles around the back of the hip. But the problem is it's actually quite a technical movement. So the squat you might think of as very easy. You put some weight on your back and then you dip down and back up. But in reality, there are a lot of moving parts to the squat. We need the knees to go pretty much in line with the toes. We need the hips to move symmetrically. We need the bottom to stick out so that we're using that hip extension type movement. But a lot of people are not really aware of how they should squat properly. They just see other people do it and they think, well, that looks quite easy. I've heard it's a really good exercise, so I'm going to have a go at doing it. And the problem is they're using squats with bad form, so their knees are collapsing inwards or falling outwards. They're not bending forwards properly, or they're using too much of their spine, or their feet are caving in like this. And all of these things can put undue stress on the knee. So a squat is a good exercise, but if you do it with bad form, it's a very bad exercise and it can cause a lot of damage. So my top tip for anyone who's a gym goer is to get someone to assess your squatting form before you start loading up the bar with weights and before you start doing these high intensity classes that involve lots of squats, because if you're doing the squat wrong, you're going to cause more damage to your knees than is necessary. Now, the third thing that destroys people's knees is no rehab after an injury. Now, most of us at some point throughout our life are going to develop a knee injury. It's just a fact of life. Especially if you play sport, especially if you ski, especially if you run or do something active, you're going to tweak your knee or find that you've developed some knee pain. It's just a fact of life, especially as we're now living longer. We're going to end up with little niggles. If you ask anyone who plays sport over the age of 30, they're always carrying some knock or another. And that's totally fine. But the problem here is if people just wait until the pain settles and then they go straight back to what they were doing before, and the pain keeps recurring, but they keep persisting in that pattern, that is when things go wrong. And the reason things are going wrong for these people is that there's obviously an underlying cause for why this pain is happening, and they're not addressing it. They're just waiting for the pain to settle. So they're avoiding the thing that aggravated it in the first place, but as soon as the pain settles down, they go straight back to doing what they were doing before. And there's that saying, I think it comes from Albert Einstein, where he says, the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. This is exactly what we see with people's knees. Now, for most people who have a niggle in their knee, there is an underlying mechanical issue, such as tightness in one of the muscles around the knee, or weakness in one of the muscles around the knee, or they're just not moving correctly, and there's things that can be done to correct all of those three things. So if you're having a knee injury or you're having a niggle and it's becoming recurrent, make sure you get checked out, speak to someone who knows what they're talking about, because they can give you some advice to stop it from getting worse and to stop it from turning into something permanent. Now, the fourth thing that people do that causes them to destroy their knees is they live their lives with weak glutes. Now, the glutes are the muscles at the back of the hip. They live here, and the ones we're talking about are the two small gluteal muscles called gluteus medius and gluteus minimus that live at the top of the hip, just below the belt line. And these muscles are really, really important. They're not actually that big, relatively speaking, to your quads or your gluteus maximus, but they do a very important job. And that job is to keep your thigh bone in line when you walk. If your glutes aren't working very well, what seems to happen is your knee starts to fall inwards because your thigh bone is not very well controlled, so it collapses inwards. And this puts a lot of pressure on the inside of the knee. And on the inside of the knee, you've got your MCL, your medial collateral ligament, you've got your medial meniscus, you've got parts of your patellofemoral joint, and all of these things can become aggravated if we don't have control of the thigh bone. So if we have weak glutes, we lose control of that thigh bone, it starts to fall inwards, and this happens very subtly, so you wouldn't notice it happening, but over time, what tends to happen is it causes mechanical stress on these structures, and it can lead to an injury as a result. There are some great exercises on my channel for building stronger glutes. I will leave a link to the video I recommend below, because that will show you how to build stronger glutes and protect your knees as a result. Now, the fifth thing that people do that destroys their knees is they allow tightness to develop in their quads and in their calves. Now, the quad muscles are these ones at the front of the thigh here, and the calf muscles are the ones at the back of the lower leg. And what these muscles have in common is they cross over the knee joint, both in front of the knee and behind the knee. So the quad crosses over the knee joint via the kneecap. So this is the quad tendon, and then it attaches to the kneecap, the patella, and then it becomes the patella tendon, which attaches to the shin. And then your calf, you can't see it in this diagram, but it lives here, and it doesn't stop at the bottom of the knee, it actually goes across the knee and attaches to the femur. Now, why is this important? Well, the reason it's important is because they both cross over the knee. If they're tight, they compress everything between them. And the thing that exists between them is the knee joint. So if you have tight quads or if you have tight calves, it compresses everything inside the knee, and it causes more mechanical stress, mechanical tension on the knee joint, and it leads to more wear and tear over time. Now, it's very easy to fix quad tightness and calf tightness. It just takes a little bit of diligence and remembering to do it, which is the main hurdle for most people, myself included. But it's very important we don't live our lives with tight quads and tight calves, because it can end up wrecking your knees if it goes on for too long. Now, the sixth thing that people do that destroys their knees, and this is very relevant for over 50s, is they stop taking the stairs. Now, I've met lots and lots of people who've reached retirement age, and they say, we're going to slightly downsize our house. So they move from a house into a bungalow. And when people tell me whether they're going to do this, I always cringe a little bit, because the stairs are such a valuable tool for keeping strength in your legs. So people who move from a house to a bungalow get what we call in the trade bungalow legs, where they lose strength in their quads and in their glutes, simply because they're not going up and down stairs 5 or 10 times a day, which is about the average for someone who lives in a house. And what's more, many of these people, when they're out and about, instead of taking the stairs, they take the escalator or the lift or the elevator, and they miss out yet again on an opportunity to keep and build strength in their lower legs. Now, the muscles that support your knees are super important to keep strong. If they're weak, then your knee joint ends up being unprotected. That can lead to more stress on the knee joint. One of the best ways to maintain your strength is to keep doing the stairs. So if you've moved to a bungalow, you're going to have to replace that lost exercise with something different. There are other ways to strengthen your knees. Sit to stands from a chair, doing lots of walks on hills, things like that can all help as well. But try to always choose the stairs if you have a choice. It's brilliant to keep that level of stair climbing in your life as much as you can. If you're considering downsizing to a bungalow, perhaps think twice. And now the seventh thing that destroys people's knees is tolerating a gradual onset of stiffness. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I'm getting old, my joints are getting stiff, this is just how it's supposed to be, it's in line with age. And to a certain extent, that's correct. But there are actually a lot of things that can be done about stiffness, particularly in the knees. Now, if you were to rest, doesn't matter what your age is, but if you were to rest for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and not really do much movement, you would find that your knee joints get incredibly stiff. And that's because you're not taking them through that full range of motion. Now, this effect, even though it happens to everyone, it does get worse as we get older. But the myth is that all of it is just down to age and there's nothing that can be done. And this is actually very far from the truth. If you were to take your knee joint through a full range of motion 10 times a day, every day, your knees would be far less stiff than someone who has the same level of arthritis but just hasn't done that exercise. And you would find that your knees hurt less and they function better as a result. So I recommend that everyone takes their knees through a full range of comfortable motion at least a few times every day. The best time to do that sometimes in the morning, because that's when stiffness seems to feel at its worst because you've been resting for a full 8 hours overnight. And if you can take your knee through a full range of motion a few times over each day, you're going to find that you ward off a lot of knee problems that can be caused by a gradual onset of stiffness. So those are all of the things I had to tell you about the 7 ways that people destroy their knees, just so you can avoid those things. And we're going to just recap them very quickly. So the first way that people destroy their knees is they twist with a planted foot. The second way that people destroy their knees is they do heavy squats with bad technique. The third way is that they don't rehabilitate their knee after a niggle or an injury. The fourth way is that they allow their glutes to become weak. The fifth way is that they allow tightness to develop in their quads and their calves. The sixth way is that they stop using the stairs. And then the seventh way is they tolerate a gradual onset of stiffness in the knee. Now, I hope that's all made sense. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to get more from me, you can pick up a copy of my book. It's called Thriving Beyond 50, and there's a link to find that below this video. It's got tons more tips and advice about preventing bad knee health. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do leave a comment below. I love to read your comments and I try to get back to all of them. But thank you for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you on the next one.